Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to first thank everybody for joining us for this final webinar in our series of 6 that have been focused on Are You Ready for Digital Manufacturing? So this final webinar will bring that whole series to a close, and where better to discuss the importance of change management, change acceleration, change adoption, and making changes stick. So I'm Jim Mansfield. I'm honored to lead the Manufacturing Intelligence Division for Matrix. I'm joined today by Jeff Panning, who's a member of our Manufacturing Intelligence Leadership Team. Jeff focuses on program management, which encompasses our standards development when it comes to project and program execution. And also John Lee's with us today, my peer and senior manager that leads the Manufacturing Intelligent Execution teams. Together, we are going to begin to unpack what we mean when we say the words making change stick as it pertains to the execution of digital manufacturing projects or programs for our clients. As we do at the beginning of all these series, I'm going to take about 4 minutes just to quickly run through Matrix Technologies, who we are at a high level, and then I'm going to turn it over to John and Jeff to take on the lion's share of the webinar. All right. So I'm actually running behind here. So Matrix today, over 40 years old, north of 325 employees, and continuing to add to our staff and talent pool to help support just some explosive growth over the last couple of years. We are north of 75 million, actually kind of holding the reins back to keep from getting up to 85 million this year in annual revenue. While the bulk of our work is located in the lower 48 here in the U.S., we have and will continue to follow our more strategic and closest partnering clients to international locations as well. So we have been so resoundingly successful over the last 40 plus years in the development of partnering clients, wherein we have become their go-to for virtually any automation or engineering project. And therefore, 85% of our projects are additional engagements with those top clientele base. So 8 market segments here. We focus obviously in the industrial manufacturing industry, not commercial, not governmental. And our experience and many years of success focusing on these markets allow us to bring new ideas, insight to our partners, taking best practices from consumer goods and being able to push it over into food and beverage or wine and spirits and metals to oil and gas, and being able to understand there are some nuances we learn at some of our clients that we can obviously pass on. And this is kind of a high level representation, if you will, of our primary services. But this webinar series and this final one is really focused on how our manufacturing intelligence and our digital transformation division help companies to digitally transform not only the plant floor, but the entire enterprise. So the reason we selected this topic at the end of the series is because managing change is likely the most crucial part of any digital transformation journey, helping our clients manage change. It's how we help them transform from current state to a more desirable future state and truly enable the benefits of DX or digital manufacturing across an entire operation. So change management helps ensure that change is accelerated, make sure it's fully adopted, and done so in a very efficient, process-driven methodology. So the main point to be made today is change management, and the process of managing change is about how people, processes, and tools help to enable change adoption. So this webinar will begin to unpack the what, the who, the why, the how of our approach to change management. So many of the concepts that we're going to discuss today can also be adopted into your change management programs if you're considering any significant organizational or operational changes. So again, hopefully what we go over today, you'll take away some things that you can incorporate. So to be Sure, we're going to be focusing on the verb use of the word change today, making someone or something different, an alteration or modification. Could also cover the replacement of something with something else, especially or specifically something of the same kind that's either newer or perceived to be better. And this is everything from the simplest of device or PLC upgrades to launching a large digital transformation effort that's going to touch everybody in the company. Before we get started, I'm going to roll into a very quick story, and I'm going to summarize. So be patient with me. Circa 2000s, I'm leading the final installation of about a $5 million spark plug manufacturing line install for a large manufacturer down south, automotive tier 1 group. We're probably 5 days away from site acceptance testing, getting the final pieces up and running, everything connected. And in the afternoon, I'm looking over and I see a group of 4 gentlemen standing up against the wall. Got their arms folded, they've got their heads cocked, foot up on the wall. I'd never met these guys, so I thought I'd run over and introduce myself. And as I did, found out that that was the night shift maintenance manager, 2 night shift team leads, and one of the quality team. And as we start walking through, what they like and whatever, they're like, well, that's not going to work, and this isn't going to work. Those lights are bad. That's not the graphics we hoped we would be using. And I'm sitting here thinking, man, that would have been really good to know, a year and a half earlier when we started the project. And it made me understand then that leadership at that company had not prepared that organization for change. Long story short, installation and SAT was delayed by 4 weeks. That cost an additional $250,000, but we had an all stop, pulled in all shifts back in, got everybody realigned, refocused, communicated throughout the entire facility. And interestingly enough, those 4 gentlemen helped me lead the entire program's change management program, and it ended up being a resounding success. And that was the aha moment for me. Change starts as you open your mouth and start planning for some sort of change inside the organization. It starts right there and has to progress through. So I'm going to shut up now, turn this over to Jeff and John, and start digging into the detail. So gentlemen, again, thanks for being here with me, and take her away.
Yeah, I'll just real quick before Jeff gets started, those are, stories that we do hear about, right, Jim? You never know where those change agents are. And sometimes if you can't identify them up front, sometimes luckily they do just, it comes out throughout the course of the project and the effort, right? So in that case, it seems like it turned around for the better, right?
Hey, amen. Painful, but better.
Yep. All right, Jeff, I'll let you get into it.
All righty. Thanks. So I'm going to start with just looking at our change management process from a high 50,000 foot level, and just kind of talk about the various steps and phases of this process. So in general, we have 6 steps and 2 phases of the process. So basically the first 3 steps go into the design phase, and then the final 3 steps go into what we call the transition phase. So in design, we start with basically defining the future state. What are the outcomes? What are the results that we're after? Then we look back and compare those to the current state and also our readiness for change. And then the gap between those two is basically what goes into the change management plan. And the last step of the design phase is really designing that plan and how we're going to manage that change, who we're going to work with, and how that's going to work throughout the project or initiatives. In the transition phase, the 4th step is the first step of the transition phase, the 4th step overall, is actually where we implement and start executing the change management plan. That's typically the go live, if you will, for the change that's occurring. That's followed up by the stabilization phase or step. And that's basically where we're coaching and supporting the folks that are being impacted by that change to help them through the process and actually start to use the new way of doing things. The final step within the transition phase is the evaluation, and that's really checking our results against what our plans were and what the expected metrics were for making that change. So as we say at the bottom here, making change stick is all about getting the process right.
Yeah, I think, Jeff, just to point out too, in that process, you show it as a wheel, right? Sometimes you may be in more than one step at a time, right? Or you may need to slide back and reevaluate things. I think we're going to talk about that just a little bit more later on. Some of it is that continuous feedback that you get those efforts into. And some of it, as we identify later, is, constantly evaluating those status and those results, right? So
that third step too, John, a great point, that the whole concept of designing a change management plan. Again, if you don't have one, put some thought in it, do some research, call us, we'll help. But without a plan, whatever you're going to do is going to become shelfware, if it's software, or hardware is going to be equipment sitting on the shelf that's not being used. You've got to take that step and design that change management plan and execute against it.
right.
Very important.
Yeah, and as we move forward, in the next slide, I'm gonna, there are different functional areas within manufacturing, right? These are typical areas that we have listed here that we deal with within digital transformation, and also in this, with change management. Is Jeff and Jim both mentioned, having a plan is one of the key things, that strategy, right? Because change can have far-reaching effects, right? So we see all these different areas. And it's important to consider how change might affect all the other areas. And when we sit down in that initial design phases, right, we're looking at that and we're talking to everybody. But it's hard to get everything right. It's just a plan, it's a plan to work with and work through. There are obvious, crossovers between the areas, right? If there's a lot of change with engineering, it's obviously going to affect production and other things. Whenever, production might have changes, it obviously probably affects like maintenance and quality and so forth, right? So there's all this overlay and there's all these things to look out for. So it's important to sit down and have that strategize early on when you're coming up with the plan in the design phase itself, right? It's because it's just difficult when you get down the road and you start switching over to the implementation, or even later in the delivery phase, and then you find out things may have got missed, and this happens, and you need to plan for how you're going to address those things, right? As Jim mentioned in his story earlier, there may be operators or other supervisors, people that might not have been involved in the beginning, that truly add value, right? Have some valuable input to the process or to whatever's being changed. And they have that detail that needs to be included in the plan, and you need to go back and you need to readdress that. So plan for changes, right? Plan for that last minute information, or what are you going to do about that? It's more effective if you can get those discussions started early, but you have to have a plan for, what are you going to do if some information becomes available later on, right? What if those people aren't included in the initial ones? So it's a strategy. You do the best you can, and you try to point those all out in the beginning during that design. You want to try to mitigate all the risks that you can as early in the process as you can. I just a couple stories, we've seen many times with this communication, change management might have been lacking. We've seen resistance in some facilities to the change. You can get lack of support or user adoption. You can have negative effects that come out of this, especially when it's not right, it's not managed properly. People get blindsided sometimes by the change. It doesn't put them, I guess, in that positive aspect or that positive transition mode to accept the change, and you don't get that high rate of user adoption. Other times, we have people that offer a lot of great feedback, right? They're very excited about the change. They heard it was coming. They're excited to be part of it. They know what part their role plays in it. They know what value it brings to them and to the organization. So they feel very empowered. And those can be very positive effects, especially when you get to the implementation and the delivery parts of this. We've seen a lot of, I guess, examples. I'll just throw a few out there. During change management, some good plans include a lot of communication in different formats, in different communication channels, which we'll talk a little bit later. And then, building that awareness is always key, getting that out for everybody. If you didn't maybe think it affected an area, but they start to get some awareness of what's going on in another area, they might be able to be more involved. You might have missed some of the stakeholders or some operators that's going to be affected that it just wasn't included in the original plan. Some other ones, in preparing for this, we talked a couple that we've seen. Gamification is one. It's very engaging. It's very collaborative, and simulations can do the same thing. But keeping work fun is one of our fundamentals here at Matrix. And we've seen organizations that have the same culture and atmosphere, and that gamification and just about learning some of the things, whether it's a technology or a process, that can help in training and adoption, right? It really gets it into the end user's hands, and it helps them get those experiences out there. So anything experiential that they could really see and really provide some good input on, those are very positive to have in your change management planning. Next slide, Jeff.
Yeah, just one more thing, John. You mentioned the missed stakeholders. I think one of the good things to think of as you're going through the discovery process is to actually go and observe the current process. It's going to help really understand who the stakeholders are, and making sure that as you walk through that process, then you're really looking at each step of that to see who's involved. Because I think one of the major reasons some projects fail is because someone was missed, and then you miss out on their engagement, their feedback, their decisions that need to be made, and things like that. And a lot of times that really will blow up the project. It'll extend the schedule and maybe put you over a budget because of that. So really identifying, like you said, and making sure you don't miss stakeholders that are involved or impacted by the change is really important.
Right, and that engagement and empowerment, like I mentioned, Jeff, in my experiences, that's some of the key to user adoption, right? We certainly have seen, some projects where we have brought in some software for a new area or something, and the users, they don't like it. They don't adopt it well. They really, latch on to the old ways or what it used to be, and they're quick to point out the flaws. But when they feel engaged and they feel empowered, right, like they can get a say in what the design is going to look like and what those requirements are, when they can be in the early design and they can really see their effect and the value that they can bring, you have wide user adoption, much higher rates, and you get that exciting type of change, right, as they transform.
Yep, great points. All right, so to build on a little bit what John was just talking about, he mentioned communication channels, and basically what I want to talk about here is the importance of communication within the change management plan. Communication is probably one of the most important components of that plan, because basically you're sharing information with people, you're getting feedback, making sure everyone's aligned on what the changes are and how are they going to impact people. And the idea here is that basically as you add more people to that communication situation where people communicating together, it becomes more complex. It's all based on communication channels. So as a quick example here, if you have 3 people in a discussion, you have 3 unique paths of communication. So person A is speaking to person B and C, and then person B and C are speaking together as well. So that's 3 channels of communication. If you go from 3 people to 4 people, each unique channel, if you count them all, there's 6 channels there. So it doubled the number of channels just by adding 1 person. On the right side of the graph here, I basically shown just as you increase that up to 20 people, I showed number of people along the x-axis there, and then number of channels along the y-axis. And you can see if you go from a project that has 10 people, or I'm sorry, 5 people, that's 10 communication channels, all the way up to, if you go up to 20 people, that goes up to 190 communication channels, so potential communication channels of people in unique conversations. And so that's a 19x increase. And so as you can see, the complexity has gone up quite a bit there. So just something to keep in mind as you're building up the communication plan and change management plan is just to think of who needs to be involved, like we just mentioned, but then how complex that communication is going to be because of the number of people involved. So John, anything to add?
I was going to jump in real quick on this one. We talked earlier about change agents and developing those early on, the folks that are all in on change. They can't wait to get this thing done. I think it's so important that as those channels begin to grow, that constant addition of those agents, so communication is consistent across the board from literally shop floor all the way to the top floor. The same communication, the same things are coming out of people's mouth. And without those guys and having 150, 200 people in the mix, holy cow, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I would just point out too, when we talk about the different roles that we're going to get into and we talk about the stakeholders, right? Sometimes these are representatives, right? So obviously, you may not get to, get direct feedback through all the channels, through, every single, staff member or operator. But, you can have representatives, right? Whether it's change agents or stakeholders, sponsors. We're going to talk about some of those roles next, Jeff. But I did want to point out, it's good to communicate with everyone, but also provide them with a channel to come back, right? To get that feedback back in. And then stakeholders need to understand that they do represent a group, right? Whether it's in a functional area or something different, that they got to make sure that they do represent them and do engage them, in that feedback and the communications in both ways, right?
Yeah, it's really got to be a two-way communication process.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so as John mentioned, here are some of the key roles during change. And we mentioned some of these already, but basically it starts with the change recipient. This is the person that is most impacted by the change. For example, this is the person that software is changing. And so it's going to change the way they do their work on a daily basis. Maybe it's a report that's changing that you get information from, or maybe it's basically the way you communicate with somebody. So it's basically the person that's really impacted by the change at hand. The change agent can really come from anywhere in the organization. And this is really a powerful role. Sometimes it's called champion also. So you may hear us kind of go back and forth between change agent and champion. But like I think Jim mentioned earlier, maybe John too, the earlier you can identify change agents in the process and really identify people that represent the various areas within that are impacted by the change, the more you can involve them in the design process. And then you can go, as you go through and communicate the changes being made, it really helps to reinforce that by saying, hey, this person was involved, they worked with you on a regular basis, to give people more confidence that everything that needed to be thought about was thought about. And so it's really an important role within this whole process. The sponsor is someone that's basically typically a leader in the organization. They're the one that basically brought about the change, likely, and likely the one that's funding the change as well. So they have a definite interest in how things are working and how change is being managed. People leaders are the ones that are managing or leading the change recipients and change agents. So obviously they have an interest in their people and how they're working, how they're developing, how they're being prepared for that change at hand. And the project manager is the one that's basically managing the project or initiative to bring about that change, to get from the current state to the future state, and working through all those gaps that are part of that change management plan. So
yeah, and I would just point out, Jeff, like we talked about, all the communications channels, right? There's so much tools out there with the newer technologies, right, to help ensure, that there's open collaboration, whether it's within this group or, in this group and those they represent, right? There's a lot of great tools out there to help collaborate, to keep those communications open. And that's really going to help things, with the planning and the feedback to the plan. And you should identify those, as you go through the process and you put together your change management plan. You want to identify, how are you going to make these communications? What tools are you going to use? We talked about some of the keys being people, process, and tools. So those communication tools are very important to, how effective the communications are going to be. And we all know effective communication can help increase the effectiveness of the overall change management, right? So those are some of the good points.
I want to bring up one other thing, and it's like, it does have to do with change management and the leadership role, right? We call a people leader. you really can't manage people. I think we would all agree to that. You lead people, you manage things. If you think you can manage people, try to manage your children. No, you're leading your children. So you gotta look right.
Good point, Jim.
Just a delineation there.
Just one more point here also about the communication channels. Here we show 5 different roles. And so if you think back to the previous slide, I think that was 10, at least 10 channels, maybe more. But realistically, on a project like this, you're going to have multiple change recipients, possibly multiple change agents, possibly multiple people leaders. And so you very quickly grow in numbers for the people impacted by the change. So it's just an example of basically how that can grow very quickly.
Oh, that's cool. So we talked earlier about the process of managing change, and we break our process down into what we call slice or in slices, and apply those slices at different stages throughout what we'll call the enablement zone and the engagement zone, which makes up the entire project or program life cycle, if you will. So on the next slide, Jeff's and John are going to dig into a bit deeper on the acronym of SLICE and the sub-steps that'll help break down our change management philosophy. Go ahead, Jeff.
All right, so like we mentioned before, the communication really has to be two-way. So it's really a matter of sharing and listening and then taking action. So that's kind of what we've adopted here with our SLICE model. So we begin the model with share. So we share what's going to be changing, the reasons for the change with the change recipients. We explain how the changes were developed. And that's often, like I said before, it's often more powerful if we can bring in and mention that the change agent or champion was part of those changes, developing those changes and determining how things need to work. And then the last part of share is really giving the recipients an opportunity to ask questions, share concerns, or make suggestions. Moving into listen, then we listen and review the feedback received from the share step. We address all concerns and suggestions with the champions first, and then address those back to the recipients to create awareness, education, and prioritization as far as how those are being addressed. So just a note here, it may be something that is a concern of theirs, that may be something we can just show them how to work, how it's going to work, or teach them basically skills that they're going to need, or maybe something that's going to be down the road that's just really needs to be a later phase, but we ensure them that that is part of we've heard what they said, we've taken it into account, and we have that on the list for a future phase. So the next part of listen is really providing feedback. Like I mentioned, providing feedback on how the concerns and suggestions were addressed. And then once again, providing those recipients an opportunity to ask questions or offer concerns. And then really, this is a process that we repeat until all concerns and suggestions have been addressed. We want to make sure that people feel like they've been heard. The invest step is really investing time to train the recipients on the day-to-day changes, what's going to be changing in the classroom first with written training and materials. We'll provide them coaching from the champions. So basically, as the champions are people that typically would be working with them, they will sit down with them and help them through the process to understand what's changing and what they need to do differently. We'd address any skills that were lacking by retraining again. And then once again, looping back to listen if things pop up that are issues or things that need to be addressed throughout the process. So this is that John mentioned the iterative process. It's not a linear 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's maybe a 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 4. That sort of process that we're jumping around to making sure that we're listening and then taking action appropriately. Finally, in the commit stage, it's really a matter of facilitating stakeholder commitment to the changes. We're really trying to get them to the point where they're making a commitment to those changes. So it may involve additional training as necessary. It may involve practice opportunities like simulated practice runs before things are actually put in place. Once again, looping back to listen if there are relevant issues identified. And one of the outcomes of this step is really to gauge readiness for making the change in the organization. So it's a matter of making that go decision on the timing of making that change based on the readiness of the recipients.
So real quick, Jeff, on that last piece, that go, no go decision for going live, inevitably in any project or program, we hear schedule compression, compress the schedule. It's got to be done quicker. We got to get it up and running faster, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's incumbent on us, and something I think we do very well at Matrix is that open communication. If you go now, when you want to, without going through the steps, your risk increases exponentially on the lack of adoption. So keep that in mind. Don't go until you're sure you're ready to go.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think there needs to be that transparency to make sure that you are providing that information back to those people making the decision of when it's going to go, and really making sure that we're looking at everything involved and making sure that it's the right timing.
Yeah.
Okay, then the last step is encourage. And so this is once the change has been made, it's really encouraging, supporting, and coaching stakeholders throughout the go live and post go live activities. Monitoring progress against the metrics, like I mentioned before. And then really, if you're doing this change in a scaled environment where you're starting small and growing it across, it's really scaling to the full capacity at that point. So these are really the 5 steps and sub-steps that we use as part of the slice model. And I think just putting the different attention on these steps, and again, sharing, listening, and taking the appropriate steps afterwards really leads to success.
So that second bullet point, Jeff, in monitoring progress against metrics, whether it's specific gains in production efficiency or increase in first pass yield or any number of different metrics that will be there, those can be quantified by dollars. So as you move to scaling changes to full capacity, if you've monitored progress, you've got the metrics, you can equate it to dollars, your CFO is going to be more likely to sign that check and get you kicked off on that next scale or extension of functionality, whatever it might be. So just wanted to hammer that one. Super important.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, and I would say, Jim, we've also seen that in various ways, right? So, you mentioned OEE, but we've certainly seen some other transitions where, some lunchrooms will have large screen, TVs or boards, and they'll discuss, like they'll mention, some of the change planning, where the progress is, and then how far that they've reached. So we've seen different ways, that they've been, companies have been transparent within their change management and how they share the plan and how they share status. And then also, like you said, and then quantify some of the metrics, right? They make those, like real time, and they're available for people to see, and getting that value and the adoption, people can get excited about it, see what part they're playing, see how far they're getting. And then it reminds them, that maybe there's an opportunity for them to provide some feedback, right? And be part of that change. So that encouraging step, the encourage step, that's a really good one, right? You don't want to miss that when you're doing your planning is how are you going to do that, right? How are you going to deliver that?
Perfect, John. Yep.
All right, so the interesting research around the stages of change from the changecycle.com. It talks about the 6 stages that people will go through typically when a change is made. And it's typically when they're impacted by a change. And the idea is that not everyone's going to go through all the changes, but your change management plan needs to account for each one of these stages to get people through the stage onto the next stage so you can make progress. So I'm not going to go through all the stages in detail, but I just wanted to touch on a couple of them here. It basically, each stage shows something to something. So it's taking people from something into another state. So for example, stage 1 is to help people regain some sense of control over what's been lost, what's changed, or what's been added. This is done through acknowledgement of the change and helping them understand that they will have support throughout the process. So we're really giving that to personal safety standpoint. Okay, I've got support, I've got the champion, I've got a team of people behind me to make me successful at this. Jumping up to stage 3 is to help people so they don't feel overwhelmed, so they can wrap their heads around the change, and they can move on to onto the motivation needed to take the next steps. Really help them to really understand, okay, this isn't overpowering. This is something we're going to take a step at a time. We have a plan in place, and so they can really focus on what the next important steps are. Jumping to stage 5 is to build a deeper level of understanding and awareness of the changes, which helps them, prepares them to apply and implement what they've learned throughout the stage. So it's really at the back end of that invest that we talked about. And finally, stage 6 is where people are truly ready for the change. They develop the ability to go from uncertainty at the beginning through confidence to make the change. And it's usually a personal sense of accomplishment and satisfaction at this stage as well. So it's I think it's an interesting concept of basically moving people through these stages, and it's definitely something that I think is helpful to build into the change management plan.
Yeah, and this is a great reference too, Jeff. Like as you put together your plan, like you said, this applies to many of the different areas, right? It's to consider, what these stages are and how do we move people, into the positive side of that, and how do we, as the infographic suggests, how do we tip that scale, right, into the positive area, right? So those definitely apply in many of the different areas that you're going to cover in your change management plan. So yeah, I like this reference a lot.
All right. So to wrap up, last time we wrapped up looking, and we started off this one by looking at people, process, and tools. And so I want to kind of look at the same thing through the same lens to wrap up the presentation today. So we talked about things from a people standpoint. So it really starts with shared culture and values that we talked about last time. It's really making sure everyone's on an equal playing field, know how they're going to operate, and know what's important to them and the company. We talk about roles and responsibilities. So really identifying who is going to be involved in the project, what their roles are, what the responsibilities are, and setting those expectations so everyone knows what to expect with moving forward. From a process standpoint, we talked about the slice process. And so moving people through that slice process and basically ensuring that we're sharing information, getting feedback, and then taking actions appropriately based on that feedback. And we talked about stages of change. So we talked about basically helping people through the early discomfort and fear and things like that they may feel because things are changing to the point where they're able to make those changes and make those successfully. Talked about a few tools. Communications is a huge tool. It's very important. Like I said, it's probably one of the most important parts of that change management plan. I think empathy is another one, really looking to see, you put yourself in other people's shoes. If they're going through changes, they may have a stressful job in the first place, but if everything's going to change or a lot of things are changing on that job, it's going to be tough. So you need to basically help them through that process. Commitment, it's critical to have that buy-in and commitment from people. So we talked about a number of ways today to get that commitment. Everything from making them aware from the beginning, really having that transparency of what's changing, how it's going to work, and things like that. I think the change agent role or champion is critical to this as well, trying to figure out number of champions that represent all the various areas that are being changed. And so as you're talking to people about the change, you're telling them that, hey, this person from your area has been working with us from the beginning of the project, which is going to give them more confidence and then also give you someone else to help train them and get them up to speed for that change to be made. And then, like I said, the feedback. Always listen to feedback, take it seriously, take action against that feedback, and go from there. So,
Yeah.
other thoughts on this, guys?
Yeah, no, I agree, Jeff. To me, people are most important, right? And during change, being able to engage them, everybody, I guess, takes engagement a little bit different, but to be able to understand that by communicating, collaborating, getting some feedback, you can really understand how to engage, all the different people involved, no matter what role they play. So to me, the process of going through and planning for all this, and leveraging tools, right, to do the collaboration and the feedback cycle, that really will help with that people engagement, right? I think people are going to be the key, right, for any change, right? I know at Matrix, certainly in our group with manufacturing intelligence, we go through a hybrid agile process with many of our things, and especially our projects. So we have, retrospectives and meetings, that are built in specifically to address that. That's part of our process. We plan for it as we plan for projects. We want to take all that output and we want to be able to be actionable with it and feed that back into our forward progress and into, the next phase of their sprints. We always encourage, all the people involved, to be very open, to have honest feedback, to feel, within our shared culture and values, to feel comfortable that they can bring up any issues that they see whatsoever. It's going to help with deliverables. It's going to help with the change. So I really think people are the key, in my opinion.
I think, and I want to roll that back around to communication, that first line under tools as well. When I think communication as it pertains to change management, I think not only verbal, which you can't over communicate enough verbally, but the written word, right? The boards on the shop floor that show current state to future state and value proposition. The repeated once weekly update Microsoft Teams meetings as we're adjusting to COVID and working remotely in a lot of areas. There's so many different forms of communication, and I challenge you to bring them all into play because the more you communicate, the more success you're going to have.
Yeah, I think just to add on that, Jim, is the nonverbal communications as well, body language, things like that. So as you're working with people, just keep an eye on that kind of stuff to see, because a lot of times that's really going to tell you the story of how well they feel about something. They may be saying one thing, but the body language may be suggesting something else. So it's always something good to keep an eye on.
Absolutely.
All right, well, I think that wraps it up.
It does. I don't know at this point if we're going to dive into Q&A. We're already about 45 minutes in. Anything specific, guys, over the last couple of weeks, even in our own engagements, that you've gotten from some of our clients when it comes to change management?
No, I think, a lot of the clients we talk to, are very open to talking about change management. Sometimes we'll bring it up, especially in early conversations. Do they have a group that works with change management? Do they have any standards, for change management planning? And a lot of the customers, that I talk with, either they're a very large organization, they do have dedicated groups and a standard process to go through this. And others have some things that are documented, so somewhat of a standard, but a lot, are very open to having the conversation with us, with Matrix, about, what can we offer, right? Like what things should we be doing? What does our process look like? And they want to have those discussions, right? So they very much understand, that having a change management plan during the project and the life cycle is really going to help with the success of the project, right?
Yeah.
And so it is a topic that we do tend to bring up. We do have clients that already are very good at this. Their organization is built for it. But I would say even in the last few weeks, some of the conversations I had, we talked about this. And I think, Jim, to be honest, it still applies, even though it's might be a small change or a minor change. Maybe it's only, on a small area, or even just like one line in the plan, right? You think, wow, it's a small project. It's only a few weeks worth of work. It's not really going to affect people. Well, you still want to go through some of these steps, right? You want to look at that early design of, well, if we were thinking about change management, let's start with the steps and let's start looking at, well, what is the change? Who does it affect, right? And just kind of think about those, start documenting those. Jeff will agree, it helps to have like a whiteboard or a tool that you can use to kind of record that conversation and get that out there. And usually, the client will find that, it might be bigger than they thought, or it might warrant a little thing. You definitely don't want to skip on the communication part, right? Getting the message out there about the change, getting it out to everyone. And then sometimes questions do come back, even from quality or somewhere else, and they'll be like, hey, this is going to affect what we do, right? Maybe you weren't thinking about this, but we should talk. So it can open up those doors for sure.
Yeah, I think like John mentioned it, even if it's a small project, I think change management is still important to think about. And I think you really need to scale your change management plan accordingly to the size of the project. It may not be as many stakeholders, it may not be as big of a change, but it's something definitely good that you need to kind of walk through these steps to really see who's being impacted by the change, who can you get to get involved early as the champion, and then how do you communicate that, get feedback, and so forth throughout the plan.
So I had a conversation with one of our clients earlier this week, in fact, and we got into a conversation around change. And this person was, I will call it upper level management, and was concerned about change acceleration, because we use that term quite a bit. And he says, what are some of those things that we can help to make change adopted faster? And what I came up with, and I want to dig in a little bit deeper here, but what I came up with is that concept of over communicating often, multiple ways of communication. The more people that know about it, get in and understand it and accept that it's coming, can move change faster. But I focused in on communication. Are there other areas that you guys can think of that would help in that change acceleration?
Yeah, I think one is the one that we mentioned previously, the gamification or the simulation. I think giving people, once people have been trained, giving them an opportunity just to go in and use a system in a simulated environment is going to help them practice and perhaps see some things that they didn't see in training. As they're going through, if they're thinking through what they do on a daily basis and start thinking of, okay, how do I use this new tool to do this? It's going to force them to get in and try different things that they may not have really put a lot of, focus in on the training piece. So I think that practice really does help accelerate the change. It helps them get to a new stage just beyond the training, but just be, that by doing that extra practice.
Oh, good stuff, Jeff. Awesome. Well, anything else, guys, or let's bring it to a close?
No, I just want to, thank all the participants and all the viewers who might go back and see the recordings. It's been a 6-part webinar series. It's been fun to do for us. It's been exciting to deliver. We've had conversations, Jim, even at some of the shows, with other people about our webinar series. So excited to see what next year brings in 2023.
Yeah, it's going to be great. We look forward to it, and again, just continuing to help our clients digitally transform their enterprise. There's a lot to it, so a lot more to unpack. So I'll second John. Well, first of all, thank John, Jeff, thank both of you guys for your subject matter expertise and on today. And then again, thank everybody for joining, or if you're watching this after the live presentation, thank you for taking the time to do that. Be on the lookout for 2023.
Yeah, reach out to us if you have any questions or want to discuss this any further. There's also a lot of other good content out on our YouTube channel as well, if you want to check that out.
Outstanding.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.